On May 22, 2022, a man was found dead under mysterious circumstances in Tehran, Iran. That man was Colonel Hassan Sayad Khodaei, a senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, whose assassination would unravel a story of espionage, betrayal, and shadow wars. The scene was disturbingly precise. Motorcycles roared up to his car outside his home, 5 bullets tore through glass and metal, and the assassins vanished into the Tehran traffic. No arrests followed, only whispers of foreign involvement, speculation growing like wildfire. Neighbors described a surreal silence before the gunfire. Witnesses saw masked riders speed away with clinical efficiency, leaving Khodaei slumped motionless in his white Peugeot. Blood stained the driver's seat, a crimson signature that screamed of professional killers. Iranian authorities immediately sealed the neighborhood. Streets were barricaded, cameras confiscated, and residents interrogated. Tehran media outlets published only fragments of the event, carefully crafted lines designed to fuel outrage but conceal the embarrassing breach of state security. Yet, within hours, speculation spread beyond Iran. Western intelligence analysts noted the striking similarity to past Mossad operations. Could Israel's shadow warriors have penetrated Tehran's fortress once again, right in the heart of its capital city? This was not merely an assassination, it was a statement delivered in daylight, designed to humiliate Iran's security apparatus. The victim was not random. He was the head of Iran's covert cyber warfare program, a man deeply entangled in digital battlefields shaping 21st century geopolitics. Colonel Khodaei was no ordinary officer. He had masterminded cyber intrusions targeting Israeli power grids, Western financial systems, and oil infrastructures across the Gulf. His command of Iran's cyber arsenal placed him at the very forefront of a shadow conflict fought without borders or treaties. The stakes were staggering. Cyber weapons can silence hospitals, derail trains, or plunge entire cities into darkness. Whoever controlled such power wielded more influence than generals commanding tanks. Khodaei was not just fighting wars of the future. He was already waging them today. Every keystroke traced back to him threatened global stability. Iranian malware campaigns sought to intimidate Saudi Arabia, punish Israel, and test NATO's resilience. Each digital assault raised fears of miscalculation, a spark igniting uncontrollable escalation between regional powers already poised on the brink of open war. His assassination, therefore, was not personal vengeance. It was a strategic elimination. Removing Khodaei crippled Iran's cyber playbook, temporarily disorienting a nation betting heavily on asymmetric warfare. For Israel and its allies, the hit signaled a triumph in the silent struggle for digital dominance. But it also introduced danger. Iran's leadership, humiliated and enraged, vowed revenge against those responsible. Revenge in this theater could mean missile strikes, kidnappings abroad, or retaliatory cyber blackouts crippling airports or stock exchanges. The chessboard of Middle Eastern conflict tilted into darker territory. The death of one man exposed the fragility of systems billions depended upon daily. Suddenly, the world realized how invisible wars could spill into living rooms without warning. Who had ordered the hit on Colonel Khodaei? Was it truly Mossad, reaching once again into the beating heart of Tehran? Or could another unseen hand have orchestrated the killing to provoke war between sworn enemies? Why strike in broad daylight, in a crowded residential street, instead of in shadows or exile? Was the spectacle itself the message, that no wall, no guard, no nation could shield those marked for elimination? Did Khodaei fall solely for his cyber campaigns, or did his deeper secrets warrant such urgency? Was he preparing an operation too dangerous to ignore, a digital strike capable of paralyzing a rival nation? What did his death mean for Iran's internal politics? Would hardliners exploit his martyrdom to tighten their grip, or would moderates use the humiliation to argue against reckless confrontations with Israel and the West? And the most chilling question of all, if a man of such stature could be assassinated at his doorstep, who among Iran's elite might be next? Ministers, scientists, commanders, were they already being hunted, their routines mapped, their fates sealed by dossiers in some foreign capital? In espionage, silence speaks louder than answers. Hassan Sayad Khodaei was born in 1972 in Hamadan province, a rugged land of mountains and legends. His childhood was framed by the Iran-Iraq War, where funeral processions became as common as weddings, shaping a boyhood defined by sacrifice and relentless national struggle. His father was a modest tradesman, a man who measured worth by endurance and loyalty. His mother embodied quiet resilience, weaving faith into daily life. Together they instilled discipline, religion, and an unyielding sense of Iranian identity into their young son. The war was his crucible. Air raid sirens cut through classrooms, soldiers marched through villages, and boys slightly older than him returned in coffins draped with flags. From this landscape, Khodaei absorbed the lesson that survival required both cunning and commitment. Teachers remembered him as reserved yet calculating, a student who memorized verses of the Quran with the same determination he applied to solving mathematical puzzles. He displayed an early fascination with technology, often dismantling radios, convinced that wires carried hidden messages only he could decode. When he reached adolescence, the Revolutionary Guard loomed as both aspiration and inevitability. Propaganda posters showed heroic martyrs, and young Hassan dreamed not merely of defending Iran, but of striking those who threatened its sovereignty, both seen and unseen. By the time peace arrived in the late 1980s, Khodaei was already forged by conflict. While other boys returned to normal adolescence, he entered military academies, convinced his destiny was tethered to Iran's wars, both traditional and those yet to be imagined. Khodaei's ideology was molded by the Revolutionary Guard's doctrine: resistance above compromise, defiance above diplomacy. He believed Iran was the vanguard of Islamic revolution, destined to challenge Western hegemony and Israeli influence. For him, cyber warfare was not crime, but divine duty. He lived austerely, despite his high rank. Colleagues recalled a man who rejected luxuries, driving a modest car, dressing plainly, and avoiding public attention. His world was one of encrypted phones, sealed offices, and long nights staring at glowing monitors. But behind that stoic exterior, quirks emerged. He obsessed over chess, playing online anonymously against strangers worldwide, relishing games that mirrored espionage, anticipating moves, sacrificing pawns, cornering kings. He collected antique locks, fascinated by mechanisms designed to keep secrets hidden. He was a man of rituals. Each morning began with prayer, black tea, and handwritten notes outlining objectives for the day. He trusted notebooks over computers, convinced some truths were too sensitive for circuits. His handwriting was small, neat, nearly mechanical in precision. Friends described him as intensely private, almost invisible outside his work. He avoided photographs, refused most interviews, and rarely attended social gatherings. For a man commanding Iran's invisible arsenal, his greatest shield was blending into anonymity. Within the Revolutionary Guard, Khodaei was known by several code names. The Engineer was the most common, a nod to his technical genius. Others called him Silent Shadow, a reference to his aversion to publicity and his uncanny ability to vanish unnoticed. Among Western intelligence circles, he carried a different moniker, the Spider. Analysts claimed he spun digital webs across continents, ensnaring networks, companies, and even governments. Each new virus or intrusion attributed to him tightened the image of a patient predator awaiting prey. Khodaei himself embraced secrecy as part of identity. He viewed anonymity not as erasure, but as armor, believing true warriors should leave no trace but results. His writing suggested he saw himself as guardian of Iran's sovereignty, shielded by God's will. Yet, behind the modest appearance, colleagues hinted at pride. He relished the idea of Israel fearing his name, Western think tanks speculating about his methods. He may not have sought fame in Tehran's bazaars, but within intelligence circles, he savored being a ghost who terrified enemies. Khodaei's formal transition from disciplined student to militant operative began in the early 1990s. He joined the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a young recruit, quickly distinguishing himself not by brute force but by technical acumen and an almost obsessive attention to secrecy. While others sought positions on battlefronts or ceremonial honor guards, Khodaei immersed himself in intelligence work. He specialized in communications security, intercepting signals, and decoding transmissions. Commanders recognized a mind more valuable behind a screen than holding a rifle in trenches. By the mid-1990s, he was entrusted with sensitive overseas assignments. Reports linked him to logistical networks supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon and covert units in Syria. These experiences deepened his conviction that Iran's strength lay not only in soldiers, but in invisible operations abroad. Politically, he aligned with hardliners. He argued in closed meetings that negotiation was weakness, that only resistance preserved sovereignty. His speeches within the Guard carried less firebrand rhetoric and more strategic logic, portraying Iran's survival as dependent on mastering both espionage and asymmetric technologies. Thus, the boy from Hamadan evolved into a rising figure within Iran's shadow apparatus. By the dawn of the digital age, he was perfectly positioned, an ideologue with technical brilliance, ready to wield keyboards as weapons in geopolitical wars yet to unfold. The Middle East in the late 20th and early 21st centuries was a battlefield defined less by geography and more by ideology. Iran and Israel emerged as central rivals, locked in an undeclared war stretching from Beirut's alleyways to cyberspace's hidden corridors. The Iran-Iraq War had already hardened Tehran's worldview. Survival required defiance. When Saddam Hussein fell, the vacuum gave Iran new opportunities. It expanded influence through proxy militias, embedding itself in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. Each expansion heightened Israeli fears of encirclement and escalation. Meanwhile, Israel viewed Iran's Revolutionary Guard as an existential threat. Missiles in southern Lebanon, drones in Syrian skies, and cyber strikes against Israeli infrastructure painted a picture of a foe unconstrained by borders or conventions. The battleground was no longer confined to physical terrain. Cyber warfare became the new front line. Viruses replaced rockets, hackers replaced soldiers, and servers replaced bunkers. Iran invested heavily in this invisible arsenal, seeking to offset Israel's technological superiority and America's military reach. In this theater, figures like Khodaei became as important as generals. Sectarian divides layered complexity onto the conflict. Sunni monarchies of the Gulf, fearing Iran's Shia expansionism, found common ground with Israel, an alliance once unthinkable. Thus, Khodaei's cyber campaigns against Saudi energy facilities were not isolated incidents but moves in a wider sectarian struggle. From Washington to Riyadh, from Tel Aviv to Tehran, the conflict radiated across continents. Every assassination, every digital incursion, every proxy clash threatened to unravel into a regional inferno. Within this volatile backdrop, Khodaei was both player and symbol, a man embodying a conflict with no defined front lines. Iran projected itself as the standard bearer of resistance. To Tehran, cyber warfare was the great equalizer, allowing a sanctioned and isolated nation to strike adversaries without fleets or air superiority. Figures like Khodaei became proof that brainpower could challenge military superpowers head-on. Israel positioned itself as both defender and avenger. Each Iranian cyberstrike was treated as an existential test. Mossad, Shin Bet, and Unit 8200 worked relentlessly to map networks, trace digital fingerprints, and, when necessary, eliminate masterminds responsible for orchestrating attacks. The United States played dual roles, publicly promoting diplomacy while secretly coordinating cyber countermeasures with Israel. Operations like Stuxnet, which crippled Iranian nuclear centrifuges, illustrated Washington's willingness to embrace offensive cyber tools. American intelligence saw Khodaei as a dangerous innovator worth monitoring constantly. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchies viewed Iranian cyber units as extensions of regional hostility. Attacks on oil installations threatened economic lifelines, making them natural allies of Israel's quiet campaign against Tehran. Secret meetings, once impossible, became routine as shared fear outweighed historic divides. Europe tread cautiously, caught between trade with Iran and security alliances with the United States. European banks, transport systems, and corporations often suffered collateral damage from Iranian cyber intrusions, yet European governments hesitated to fully align with Washington's aggressive containment strategy. Russia and China saw opportunity. Moscow welcomed Iranian cyber expertise for shared operations, while Beijing provided infrastructure and training. Both countries benefited from Tehran's defiance, using its confrontations with the West as cover for their own digital operations in other regions. Thus, the assassination of Khodaei was not a bilateral quarrel, but a strike reverberating across capitals. Every nation with a stake in the digital battlefield interpreted his death through the lens of their own strategies and fears. Colonel Hassan Sayad Khodaei represented more than a cyber commander. He embodied Iran's strategic adaptation. Where traditional armies faltered against sanctions and superior adversaries, he offered a new path. Invisible battlefields where asymmetric advantage favored intellect over industrial might, creativity over conventional arsenals. He was central to Unit 840, a Revolutionary Guard branch accused of orchestrating global operations. Intelligence briefings described him as the architect linking cyber sabotage to physical attacks, bridging digital viruses with assassination squads, giving Tehran an interconnected web of unconventional power. Khodaei's innovations reshaped Iranian doctrine. He promoted cyber intrusions not merely as harassment but as deterrence, claiming each blackout in Tel Aviv, or data theft in Riyadh, reminded adversaries that Iran could strike deeply without firing a single missile. To Israel, his existence was intolerable. He was perceived as a living engine of escalation, someone who could launch paralysis at will. Removing him was not just removing a commander, it was dismantling the keystone in Iran's asymmetric warfare architecture, at least temporarily. Inside Iran, his influence extended beyond operations. He trained protégés, recruited hackers from universities, and built parallel structures that blurred state authority with shadow units. His death threatened continuity, leaving gaps in projects critical to Iran's long-term cyber aspirations. Globally, Khodaei symbolized the new era of warfare. He demonstrated that a commander behind a keyboard could wield as much destructive capacity as a tank division. For allies and enemies alike, his life and assassination highlighted the terrifying potential of unseen battlefields. Khodaei's earliest clashes with authority occurred not in Tehran, but abroad. In the mid-1990s, European intelligence services linked him to suspicious travel networks moving money, forged documents, and communications equipment through Turkey and the Balkans. Yet he evaded capture, slipping away before raids closed in. Reports suggested he orchestrated clandestine procurement missions, sourcing dual-use technologies banned under international sanctions. Laptops, encryption tools, and server components, items seemingly harmless, were redirected into covert Iranian laboratories. Customs officials occasionally detained couriers connected to him, but Khodaei himself remained untouchable. Western agencies considered issuing arrest warrants, but evidence was slippery, buried under layers of aliases and proxy operatives. He used passports under multiple identities, each supported by impeccable forgery. To those hunting him, he seemed less a man and more a shifting phantom. Inside Iran, whispers suggested disciplinary warnings from rival commanders, jealous of his growing autonomy. Yet instead of derailing his career, these episodes enhanced his mystique. He was seen as a commander who operated on the edge, willing to risk exposure for technological breakthroughs. By the early 2000s, Khodaei had accumulated a file of suspicions across Interpol desks. None translated into formal charges, but the pattern was clear. He was already shaping himself into the architect of networks stretching across continents, half diplomat, half shadow merchant. Whispers circulated that Khodaei once fell briefly into foreign custody. Some reports claimed he was detained in a Gulf state during a covert transfer of encrypted hard drives. Official records were scarce, but rumors of interrogation and torture spread rapidly among Iranian ranks. The tale described brutal confinement, weeks in isolation, lights never dimming, interrogators rotating in endless cycles. He allegedly endured pressure to reveal networks of couriers and cyber operatives. According to legend, he spoke nothing, answering questions only with silence or prayer. Whether myth or truth, the story transformed him. Within the Revolutionary Guard, he became a symbol of resilience, a commander who had stared into the abyss and refused to break. His mystique grew, and his authority among junior operatives solidified. For adversaries, the rumors were equally unsettling. If he had indeed survived enhanced interrogations without revealing secrets, then Khodaei was not just skilled, but unyielding, a man whose loyalty was weaponized. The narrative of torture, true or embellished, hardened his reputation into something approaching myth. Following the alleged detention episode, Khodaei returned to Iran with sharper determination. His trajectory shifted from peripheral courier missions to direct involvement in specialized units. He was absorbed into the elite Quds Force, the branch dedicated to extraterritorial operations, blending espionage with paramilitary tactics. Within the Quds Force, he played an instrumental role in shaping Unit 840, a cell tasked with clandestine overseas operations. This unit coordinated assassination plots, smuggling lines, and cyber intrusions. Khodaei became both architect and overseer, orchestrating networks that stretched from South America to Eastern Europe. Colleagues testified that he viewed cyber capabilities as inseparable from traditional militant structures. He argued passionately that bombs and bullets gained greater reach when amplified by digital sabotage. Under his influence, small hacking collectives were recruited and absorbed, their work militarized for state use. Some analysts speculated that Khodaei himself founded splinter groups masquerading as independent hacktivists. These fronts claimed responsibility for cyber attacks on banks, oil firms, and infrastructure, shielding Tehran from direct attribution. In reality, the fingerprints of Unit 840 and Khodaei were embedded deep within the code. By the early 2010s, Khodaei had transitioned fully into a hybrid militant commander. No longer just a cyber strategist, he was the nexus connecting ideology, clandestine operations, and covert warfare. His groups evolved into instruments of Iranian foreign policy, and his influence expanded accordingly. By the mid-2010s, Khodaei's portfolio expanded beyond cyber campaigns. Intelligence files linked him to smuggling pipelines transporting weapons through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon. Convoys disguised as aid shipments carried missiles, drones, and encrypted gear, each route mapped and refined under his supervision. He also allegedly masterminded kidnapping plots targeting Israeli and Western nationals abroad. These operations aimed not only to extract intelligence, but also to secure bargaining chips for prisoner exchanges. Some victims vanished into shadow prisons, their existence acknowledged only through whispers and intelligence reports. Killings soon followed. Unit 840, under Khodaei's coordination, was implicated in targeted assassinations of dissidents and defectors. Car bombs in Damascus, silenced pistols in Istanbul, unexplained poisonings in Eastern Europe, all bore hallmarks of his organizational reach, though Tehran consistently denied official involvement. What made these escalations chilling was the seamless integration of physical and digital domains. Cyber intrusions would disable cameras or alter travel records, clearing paths for operatives to strike. Each mission demonstrated an unnerving sophistication, technological disruption coupled with lethal efficiency on the ground. These operations marked Khodaei's full embrace of shadow warfare. He had transcended the image of engineer-hacker. He was now orchestrator of an international campaign, one that blurred the line between statecraft and terrorism, diplomacy and assassination, wires and bullets. One of the earliest attributed incidents occurred in July 2011, when an explosion rocked a weapons depot near Isfahan. Western intelligence suspected sabotage cloaked as accident. Forensic digital trails suggested Khodaei's cyber operatives had disabled safety protocols before physical operatives planted charges. In 2012, an attempted plot in Bangkok targeted Israeli diplomats. Thai police uncovered explosives linked to Iranian nationals. Investigators pieced together communications routed through encrypted servers traced to Khodaei's networks. Though the operatives were captured, the operation signaled his reach into Southeast Asia. By 2015, cyber intrusions against Saudi Aramco oil systems crippled thousands of computers. Malware wiped files, replacing them with images of burning flags. Analysts concluded the attack bore Unit 840's signature. Khodaei reportedly coordinated timing with militia actions on the ground in Yemen. In 2017, a dissident journalist in Turkey was found poisoned. Local authorities suspected food tampering. Later analysis uncovered tampered travel itineraries, suggesting cyber manipulation cleared gaps for the assassin's escape. Whispers within intelligence circles pointed again toward Khodaei's orchestration of seamless digital and physical strikes. The most audacious came in 2019, when rockets were fired from Syria into northern Israel. The launch coincided with cyber disruptions targeting Israeli emergency systems, slowing response coordination. This combined assault epitomized Khodaei's philosophy: chaos by design, war without borders, visibility, or hesitation. By the early 2020s, Khodaei's activities had elevated him to international infamy. Israeli intelligence dossiers labeled him a priority target, while American agencies quietly added him to classified watch lists. His fingerprints, digital and operational, appeared in nearly every significant Iranian-linked covert incident. Interpol never officially issued a red notice, but his name circulated through secure channels. European intelligence services flagged his travel patterns, alerting one another whenever his forged passports passed through airports. He became a ghost, tracked not by public warrants but by whispered cables. Western think tanks described him as a cyber general without uniform. Reports argued his command over Iran's hacking apparatus rivaled the importance of missile brigades. For adversaries, neutralizing him meant dismantling a cornerstone of Tehran's asymmetric strategy, however temporary that relief might be. In Israel, his face adorned classified briefing rooms, circled in red ink beside lists of aliases. To policymakers, he was not just another commander. He was the embodiment of Iran's capability to infiltrate power grids, paralyze airports, and disrupt daily civilian life. Iran, meanwhile, elevated his status domestically. Official media hailed him as a protector of sovereignty, a shadow guardian thwarting Zionist plots. The more his name appeared in Western reports, the more Tehran celebrated him, weaving myth and propaganda into his biography. This duality, terrorist abroad, hero at home, cemented his inevitability as a target. Assassinations were not random acts, but carefully calibrated signals, and Khodaei's growing notoriety ensured that somewhere, in a clandestine office, his file was growing thicker, marked with the quiet inevitability of death. The first whispers of attempts on Khodaei's life surfaced around 2016. Intelligence leaks suggested that Israeli operatives attempted to sabotage a convoy carrying him through Damascus. A roadside bomb detonated prematurely, killing escorts but leaving him shaken, narrowly escaping into the Syrian night. In 2018, while traveling under an alias through Eastern Europe, he allegedly consumed food laced with a slow-acting toxin. He fell violently ill, but survived after urgent hospitalization. Iranian officials dismissed the event as routine illness, though counterintelligence later confirmed traces of synthetic poison. Drone surveillance also targeted him. Reports indicated that Israeli drones tracked his movements in southern Lebanon, circling above safe houses. Twice strikes were aborted, one for fear of collateral casualties, another because his convoy unexpectedly diverted, avoiding destruction by mere minutes. Closer to home, in 2020, gunmen in northern Tehran attempted a drive-by attack. Their motorcycle malfunctioned, weapons jammed, and they fled before guards intervened. Iranian media never confirmed the event, but security chatter described it as a botched hit organized by foreign operatives. Each failed attempt increased both paranoia and prestige. For Tehran, these near deaths elevated him into martyr-in-waiting, a commander shielded by divine providence. For his enemies, the failures only deepened determination, proving his survival was temporary, his elimination inevitable. By the time bullets finally pierced his car in 2022, Khodaei had lived through years of rehearsals in death. The hunt had been relentless, international, and merciless. That it ended in daylight on his doorstep was less coincidence than culmination. Every shadow war carries an unspoken law. Those who orchestrate death eventually inherit it. For Khodaei, each sunrise was both a beginning and a countdown. Every routine drive home a potential last journey observed by unseen eyes. Iranian insiders later admitted he knew he was marked. He altered routines, swapped vehicles, and rotated routes. Yet patterns always emerge, and Mossad analysts prided themselves on patience. The longer a target evades, the more predictable his defenses become. In Tehran, whispers circulated that he had survived too many times to survive forever. Even his colleagues described his existence as borrowed. His face, once absent from public view, became a symbol of both defiance and inevitability, an icon destined to fall. Thus, by 2022, his death was not a question of if, but when. The hunters had rehearsed, the stage was set, and the assassin's clock ticked louder with each operation. The silence before the final strike was heavy with certainty. In early May 2022, weeks before the strike, operatives began filtering quietly into Tehran. They arrived under layers of aliases: businessmen, aid workers, tourists clutching cameras. Flights from Istanbul, Doha, and Tbilisi carried them, scattering their entry points to avoid detection. Their passports bore exquisite forgeries, crafted with holograms indistinguishable from authentic documents. Some identities had been stolen from real European citizens, chosen carefully to delay suspicion. Others carried diplomatic covers, exploiting gaps in Tehran's already strained border security apparatus. Each operative traveled light: a suitcase of clothing, innocuous electronics, and coded notes concealed in everyday objects. Laptops carried no sensitive data. Instead, instructions were memorized, rehearsed like scripts in a high-stakes play where forgetting meant death. Once inside, they disappeared into Tehran's sprawl. Some checked into modest hotels near Imam Khomeini Square. Others rented apartments under fabricated names. Their movements were mundane: ordering tea, visiting bazaars, walking crowded boulevards. Yet every step was calculated, every glance memorizing the rhythms of the city. Their mission was singular: track Colonel Khodaei, confirm his routines, and prepare a strike that could not fail. They had come not for diplomacy, not for intelligence, but for finality. Tehran would soon feel their presence only through absence. The operatives embedded themselves with surgical precision. One checked into a modest hotel overlooking a key intersection near Khodaei's residence. Another posed as a researcher, requesting a room with balcony access. Their cover stories were bland enough to be invisible, yet convincing under scrutiny. From these rooms, they began surveillance. Cameras disguised as power banks sat charging on windowsills, quietly recording street traffic. Drones the size of sparrows launched briefly at dusk, blending with Tehran's restless skies, capturing aerial patterns invisible from the ground. Operatives tracked Khodaei's Peugeot sedan. They noted his punctual arrivals and departures, the pauses at intersections, the greetings with neighbors. He rarely varied his routes, confident in Tehran's protective layers, unaware that every habit was being logged and dissected. Hotels doubled as safe houses. Maps of the neighborhood were pinned discreetly inside wardrobes, coded notations scribbled onto takeaway menus. Electronic trackers were tested, then discarded, as the operatives opted for human eyes and intuition. The target was too important to risk technological misfires. Every night, encrypted reports left Tehran disguised as ordinary emails, shopping lists, weather updates, fragments of poetry. Each line concealed coordinates, times, and behavioral notes. The hunters were not guessing anymore. They were rehearsing his death. May 22nd, 2022 began like any other for Colonel Khodaei. At 3 a.m., surveillance confirmed lights flickering in his apartment window. He prayed at dawn, followed his ritual of tea and notes, then prepared for a routine afternoon drive. By 10 a.m., watchers had already taken positions. One operative sat at a cafe opposite his residence, pretending to scroll a phone. Another waited 2 streets away, engine idling, eyes fixed on approaching traffic. Every detail of timing was synchronized. At 1:30 p.m., Khodaei attended a short meeting at Revolutionary Guard offices. Surveillance noted his punctual exit, his familiar walk to the white Peugeot. The car, ordinary in every sense, had unknowingly become the stage for his final scene. By 4 p.m., he was en route home. Operatives received confirmation through subtle signals. An umbrella tilted at a corner, a taxi door closed twice. These were not coincidences, but coded affirmations. The plan was in motion, the target inbound. At 4:10 p.m., Khodaei parked outside his residence. He lingered briefly, collecting belongings. Neighbors later recalled nothing unusual, just the faint hum of motorcycles. Then came the eruption. 5 shots, fired with surgical precision, shattering glass and silence alike. Within seconds, the assassins were gone. Motorcycles vanished into Tehran's maze, weapons concealed, riders merging into traffic like ghosts. Witnesses described efficiency so chilling it seemed rehearsed on the very same street. For Khodaei, the countdown had ended. For Tehran, it had just begun. The operation's success rested not only on planning, but on tools honed through decades of covert tradecraft. The motorcycles themselves were modified, engines tuned for sudden acceleration, license plates cloned from legitimate vehicles, and compartments built to conceal compact weaponry. The pistols used were fitted with suppressors designed to mask the explosive signature, producing bursts mistaken for firecrackers in a noisy city. Forensics later revealed specialized ammunition, engineered to minimize ricochet and maximize fatal penetration through automotive glass and metal. Communications were encrypted across disposable devices. Messages appeared as harmless social media exchanges, recipes, travel tips, even chess moves, each concealing coordinates and instructions in coded sequences. No single device held the entire plan, limiting risk if one fell into Iranian hands. Lock-picking kits, disguises, and forged credentials completed their arsenal. Operatives carried false student IDs, embassy passes, and even utility worker uniforms, enabling them to access restricted areas or deflect suspicion during reconnaissance. Every item was chosen for adaptability and deniability. Perhaps the most remarkable tool was patience. Surveillance logs showed weeks of disciplined observation without misstep. No cameras detected unusual patterns. No neighbors recalled suspicious strangers. The weapons mattered, but invisibility, both digital and physical, remained the deadliest instrument of all. There were moments when the entire mission teetered on collapse. One evening, an operative shadowing Khodaei nearly brushed shoulders with a Revolutionary Guard patrol. He paused, pretended to tie a shoe, heart pounding as rifles swung idly toward the sidewalk. On another day, surveillance drones nearly betrayed them. A neighbor spotted something flicker above the rooftops, pointing skyward. The device was retrieved within seconds, tucked into a jacket as laughter and casual chatter disguised urgency. Suspicion passed, but barely. Even the motorcycles risked exposure. Days before the strike, one was stopped at a traffic checkpoint. The rider produced forged papers, exchanged pleasantries with officers, and rolled away. Later, handlers marked the episode as the closest brush with premature discovery. For weeks, Tehran held its breath without knowing. The operatives moved through the city like shadows brushing against light, always one mistake from vanishing into prisons or graves. The suspense was not cinematic illusion, it was the razor's edge of reality. At precisely 4:12 p.m., the final act unfolded. Khodaei sat behind the wheel of his white Peugeot, adjusting papers beside him. Two motorcycles approached, one slightly ahead, the other closing in from the rear, engines purring like predators circling prey. 5 shots erupted in clinical sequence. 2 pierced the windshield, one struck his chest, another his neck, the last his jaw. The glass shattered outward, shards cascading onto the pavement as his body collapsed sideways, blood seeping into fabric. Neighbors froze at the sound, mistaking it for construction noise before realizing the horror. The riders did not linger. They accelerated in opposite directions, dissolving into Tehran's chaos. Their presence erased within seconds, leaving only silence and disbelief behind. When responders arrived, Khodaei's pulse was gone. His lifeless body, slumped against the seatbelt, seemed less like a commander than an ordinary man ambushed by fate. But those who orchestrated the strike had staged no accident, only a message etched in daylight. The discovery unfolded in chaos. Neighbors, drawn by the echo of gunfire, gathered hesitantly around the white Peugeot. Windows shattered, blood pooled, and Colonel Khodaei's lifeless form slumped inside. Shock rippled through the crowd. Tehran's fortress had been breached in plain daylight. Within minutes, Revolutionary Guard units swarmed the street. Sirens pierced the afternoon calm as soldiers sealed off the block, shouting orders, confiscating phones, and dispersing onlookers. Families were herded indoors, blinds shut, while armored vehicles rolled in like guardians arriving too late. Journalists rushed to the scene but were blocked by armed men. Official statements lagged behind reality, initially describing only a terrorist act. The body was carefully removed under heavy guard, wrapped in the Iranian flag, escorted toward military facilities for examination. What remained on the pavement was not simply death, but humiliation. Tehran citizens whispered of betrayal, infiltration, even treachery from within. A commander assassinated at his doorstep shattered illusions of security, leaving only questions carved into the blood-stained asphalt of Pasdaran Street. Khodaei's body was rushed to Bakiatala Military Hospital, where doctors and forensic specialists convened under strict orders. The autopsy confirmed what the scene had already revealed: 5 rounds fired with lethal accuracy, each designed to ensure no chance of survival. Ballistics identified the ammunition as specialized 7.62 mm rounds, consistent with weapons favored in covert operations. Trajectory analysis showed the shooters had fired from close range, no more than 3 meters, with precision suggesting extensive rehearsal rather than improvisation. Medical examiners noted instantaneous fatal injuries. 1 bullet severed the carotid artery, another penetrated the heart. Death was near immediate, occurring before emergency responders arrived. The report concluded he never spoke a final word, his life extinguished mid-breath, mid-routine. The findings were classified but leaked through whispers in Tehran. Analysts abroad highlighted the chilling efficiency. Killers who left no residue, no fingerprints, no traceable weapons. To Iran's leadership, the autopsy offered no solace. It only confirmed what they already feared. This was not random terrorism, but a surgical strike by professionals. Iranian investigators immediately seized CCTV footage from streets surrounding Pasdaran Avenue. Grainy images revealed the motorcycles seconds before the shooting. Their riders masked, their license plates blurred or replaced with stolen duplicates. Yet the escape routes vanished into Tehran's dense sprawl within minutes. Hours of footage from traffic cameras were examined frame by frame. Analysts spotted anomalies: riders switching helmets mid-route, vehicles pausing beneath blind spots, surveillance gaps deliberately exploited. It became evident the assassins had studied Tehran's camera network with unnerving familiarity. Attention soon shifted abroad. Intelligence leaks suggested operatives had entered Iran on forged European passports. Several bore uncanny resemblance to identities exposed in prior Mossad operations, including assassinations in Dubai and covert missions in Cyprus. Tehran accused Western governments of complicity. The passport scandal deepened when European citizens discovered their names used without consent. Some received unexpected media calls, forced to deny involvement in the killing. Governments scrambled to explain how sensitive data could be stolen and repurposed into ghost identities for lethal missions. For Iran, the revelations compounded humiliation. Not only had operatives struck in the capital, but they had done so using the tools of international bureaucracy: passports, visas, airport security, systems Tehran could not control. The investigation uncovered no arrests, only shadows. The assassination ignited an immediate diplomatic storm. Tehran publicly accused Israel of orchestrating the killing, branding it state terrorism. Iranian officials vowed revenge, declaring that Khodaei's blood would not go unanswered. State television broadcast images of his funeral preparations, transforming him into a symbol of resistance. Israel remained silent as tradition dictated. No confirmations, no denials, only knowing glances from officials when pressed by reporters. Western intelligence sources, however, hinted privately that Mossad had indeed executed the strike, labeling it part of an escalating shadow war. The United States distanced itself, urging de-escalation while quietly acknowledging awareness of Israeli operations. Washington faced delicate balancing, restraining Tehran's fury without alienating its closest regional ally. Diplomatic cables revealed concerns of retaliation against American personnel stationed across the Middle East. European governments expressed unease after the passport revelations. Several summoned Israeli ambassadors for explanation, demanding assurances that their citizens' identities would not be weaponized in future operations. Publicly, statements condemned violence, but privately, officials admitted grudging admiration for the operation's precision. Meanwhile, regional militias aligned with Iran raised their alert levels. Hezbollah issued threats, while Iraqi factions promised retribution. Cyber units launched probing attacks on Israeli banks and government portals. Digital ripples, signaling that retaliation might unfold not through missiles, but through keystrokes. The global fallout was less about mourning one man and more about the precedent. The daylight assassination of a cyber commander underscored a chilling truth. In modern warfare, no battlefield is safe and no rank offers immunity. Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, was founded in 1949 with a mandate to safeguard the survival of the young state. From its earliest years, it developed a reputation for audacity, operating far beyond its borders, targeting enemies with speed and precision. The agency quickly distinguished itself through daring missions. It captured Adolf Eichmann in Argentina, dismantled terrorist networks in Europe, and sabotaged weapons shipments bound for hostile regimes. Each success reinforced its image as an organization capable of shaping history from the shadows. Mossad's reach extended into the Middle East with relentless consistency. Assassinations of Palestinian militants in Beirut, strikes against scientists aiding Iran's nuclear program, and covert support for dissidents abroad cemented its reputation as both sword and scalpel of Israeli policy. Its guiding philosophy was simple yet uncompromising: preemption. Rather than wait for threats to materialize, Mossad believed in striking first, neutralizing adversaries before they could act. This doctrine blurred the line between defense and offense, making its operations simultaneously admired and condemned worldwide. By the 21st century, Mossad's legend had become both shield and weapon. Enemies feared its omnipresence. Allies envied its precision. The agency did not merely gather intelligence, it engineered outcomes, reshaping geopolitics one clandestine act at a time. Mossad's power rested not only on its reputation, but on its specialized units. Among the most feared was Khodaei, the clandestine team responsible for targeted assassinations. Known for ruthless efficiency, its operatives were masters of disguise, deception, and elimination without trace. Supporting Khodaei were elite branches such as Unit 8200, Israel's cyber intelligence powerhouse. While Khodaei struck with bullets, Unit 8200 wielded code, mapping networks and disrupting enemies through digital sabotage. Together they fused physical and virtual warfare into a seamless doctrine. Other divisions extended Mossad's reach. Caesarea coordinated deep cover field operatives. Tavel managed diplomatic intelligence and foreign liaisons. Metzada specialized in sabotage, psychological warfare, and blackmail operations. LAP focused on scientific and technological infiltration. Each unit served as a gear in the larger machine. These divisions operated independently, yet converged during high-value missions. In Khodaei's case, cyber intelligence likely tracked his communications, while field units prepared the hit. Mossad's structure ensured redundancy. If one branch faltered, another compensated, preserving operational continuity at all costs. The synergy of these units made Mossad not merely an agency, but a mosaic of clandestine expertise, capable of reaching into enemy capitals, erasing adversaries, and leaving only unanswered questions behind. Mossad's legacy was carved through operations that blurred the line between espionage and warfare. In 1960, its agents abducted Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann from Buenos Aires, spiriting him to Israel for trial, a mission that cemented Mossad's audacious reputation. In the 1970s and 1980s, it pursued militants across Europe and the Middle East. Operations in Beirut targeted leaders of Palestinian factions, often with car bombs or silenced pistols. Each strike was both retribution and deterrent, broadcasting Israel's reach to adversaries. Later decades focused increasingly on Iran. Between 2010 and 2020, several Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in Tehran. Bombs affixed to cars, mysterious shootings on crowded streets. Tehran consistently blamed Mossad, while Israel maintained silence, neither confirming nor denying involvement. The infamous Stuxnet cyber attack in 2010, attributed jointly to Mossad and the CIA, crippled Iranian centrifuges at Natanz. It marked a new era of covert sabotage, where invisible code achieved what airstrikes could not. Khodaei's death fit seamlessly into this tradition of silent, surgical eliminations. These operations built a mythology. Mossad was not infallible, but it was relentless. Each strike reinforced the belief that no adversary, however protected, was beyond its grasp. For Mossad's directors and Israeli leadership, motivations were both political and personal. Each sanctioned operation aimed to project deterrence, to remind adversaries that plots against Israel carried lethal consequences. Yet behind strategy lay deeper drivers, memories of persecution, fear of annihilation, and the unrelenting doctrine that survival demanded audacity. Eliminating Khodaei was not merely tactical, it was symbolic, reinforcing Israel's message that enemies could be reached anywhere, anytime. Leaders weighed diplomatic fallout but chose certainty. A future with Khodaei alive was riskier than the storm unleashed by his death. Colonel Hassan Sayad Khodaei's funeral unfolded with orchestrated grandeur. Draped in the Iranian flag, his coffin was carried through Tehran's streets, flanked by Revolutionary Guard commanders and throngs of mourners chanting vows of revenge. State media broadcast the procession nationwide, transforming his death into spectacle. Ayatollah Khamenei personally praised him as a martyr, framing the assassination as proof of Zionist cowardice and Iranian resilience. Posters of Khodaei appeared across the capital, depicting him as both victim and hero. The crowd's grief was carefully channeled into fury, a rallying cry for unity against Israel. Immediate impact rippled beyond symbolism. Security forces tightened patrols, intelligence agencies launched sweeping purges, and foreign embassies braced for retaliatory plots. Tehran's streets throbbed with both mourning and menace, as if the air itself promised retribution. His death became not an end, but ignition. In the months following Khodaei's death, Iran faced a vacuum within its covert cyber apparatus. His protégés assumed fragments of his portfolio, but none possessed his authority or vision. Projects stalled, coordination faltered, and rival factions competed for dominance in the shadows. The assassination also escalated the shadow war. Iranian-backed militias intensified rocket attacks in Iraq and Syria, framing them as tributes to their fallen commander. Cyber units probed deeper into Israeli infrastructure, launching disruptive but clumsy assaults that betrayed the absence of Khodaei's discipline. Regionally, his death emboldened Israel's strategy. The strike was interpreted as proof that Tehran's commanders, however shielded, were vulnerable. Arab Gulf states quietly applauded, seeing in the operation reassurance that Iran's growing influence could still be checked with surgical blows. For global intelligence circles, Khodaei's elimination set precedent. Cyber generals were no longer safe behind screens. Digital warfare had blurred into assassination campaigns, where masterminds of invisible battles faced visible consequences. His death redefined the rules of engagement for 21st century conflicts. In the end, Hassan Sayad Khodaei's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics, but what it revealed was a hidden world, one where governments sanction killers, where cyber warriors die in daylight, and where silence buries truth deeper than bullets. His assassination was both message and omen, that invisible wars now claim visible corpses, that shadows reach across borders with impunity. The lesson was stark, unblinking. Power is measured not only by armies or weapons, but by the ability to erase an enemy, leaving behind only questions echoing in the dark.